Sydney. To the world, it is the jewel of Australia. A glittering harbour, world-famous beaches, and a skyline crowned by the Opera House. Tourists see paradise. Investors see opportunity. But beneath the postcard image lies a city with another identity. A Sydney ruled by gangs, cartels, and dynasties of blood money. Behind the bright lights of Darling Harbour and the nightlife of King's Cross, crime families built empires worth billions. For decades, Sydney has been a city divided, one of glamour on the surface and ruthless power struggles in the shadows. Today, we uncover the 5 richest and most dangerous criminal empires that turned Sydney's streets into kingdoms of untouchable wealth. 5. The Ibrahim Empire, Kings of Kings, Cross. Estimated wealth, billions in nightlife and drugs. Few names carry as much weight in Sydney's underworld as John Ibrahim. Born in Lebanon and raised in Sydney, he rose to power in the 1990s at a time when King's Cross was the beating heart of the city's nightlife. Nightclubs were the gateways to drugs, gambling, and illicit deals. And Ibrahim became the man who controlled them all. Dubbed the King of the Cross, he built his reputation on charm, intimidation, and ruthless business sense. To the public, he was photographed alongside celebrities, socialites, and politicians, a nightclub tycoon who seemed larger than life. But behind the neon lights, he was the architect of a sprawling empire tied to narcotics, extortion, and money laundering. His brothers, Michael, Sam, and Fadi, expanded the family's reach, often making headlines for drug importation rings, violent feuds, and multi-million-dollar police busts. The Ibrahim network allegedly funneled heroin, ecstasy, and later cocaine into the clubs they controlled, with profits laundered through luxury properties and businesses across Sydney. Millions were spent on mansions, fast cars, and international travel, a lifestyle that both fascinated and enraged the public. Despite decades of police investigations, John Ibrahim himself became notorious for avoiding major convictions. He was questioned countless times, but managed to walk free, reinforcing his legend as untouchable. For many Australians, he became a symbol of the fine line between legitimate business and organized crime, someone who thrived in both worlds. In King's Cross, the Ibrahim Empire wasn't just about drugs or money. It was about control, reputation, and power. They turned Sydney's most famous nightlife district into their kingdom. And for decades, no one could rival the throne of the King of the Cross. 4. The Hamzi and Alameddine clans, the street kings of Western Sydney. Estimated wealth, billions in drugs, guns, and extortion. While the Ibrahims ruled King's Cross, the Hamzi and Alameddine clans carved out empires in Western Sydney. Their wealth wasn't built in glittering nightclubs, but in suburban streets turned into battlefields. These families rose from immigrant communities, where poverty and limited opportunities gave rise to organized gangs. But what started as street-level rackets quickly evolved into billion-dollar narcotics operations and violent turf wars. The Hamzi clan's most notorious figure, Bassem Hamzi, demonstrated the frightening reach of this network. While serving time for murder, he founded the feared Brothers 4 Life gang from inside prison. Even behind bars, he directed drug deals, extortion rackets, and shootings across Sydney. His influence proved how deeply these clans embedded themselves in the city. A single phone call from prison could spark chaos on the streets. Their rivals, the Alameddine family, built their own empire on cocaine, meth, and synthetic drugs. They were heavily linked to the dial-a-dealer system, where customers could order drugs on encrypted apps and have them delivered like food. It was a billion-dollar business model that modernized Sydney's drug trade, making the Alameddines rich beyond imagination. At their peak, they had networks of drivers, safe houses, and distributors spread across the suburbs, turning their brand of organized crime into something resembling a corporate operation. But with fortune came violence. The Hamzi and Alameddin clans became locked in a bloody feud. Drive-by shootings, kidnappings, and public assassinations turned suburbs like Auburn, Guildford, and Bankstown into war zones. Families buried their sons while headlines screamed of gangland wars raging on Sydney's streets. Even everyday civilians began to feel unsafe as shootouts erupted near schools, cafes, and shopping centers. Billions were funneled through luxury homes, gyms, and car dealerships, disguising illicit money as legitimate wealth. To their communities, they were both feared and respected, symbols of power who commanded loyalty through family bonds and reputations. Despite relentless police crackdowns and task forces, both families proved remarkably resilient, adapting with new methods and alliances. In Western Sydney, the Hamzi and Alameddin names weren't just known, they were legendary. These clans ruled their territories like kings, and even prison walls or bulletproof vests couldn't contain their influence. 3. The Triads, Asian syndicates of Sydney, estimated wealth, $10 to $15 billion in meth and gambling. Beyond the Bickies and Middle Eastern clans, Sydney became a playground for powerful Asian syndicates whose influence stretched across continents. The Triads, criminal brotherhoods from Hong Kong, China, and Vietnam, established some of the richest narcotics pipelines in Sydney's history. Unlike the public violence of bikies, the Triads thrived in secrecy, embedding themselves quietly into the city's trade, culture, and business. Their specialty was methamphetamine, or ice. As Sydney's appetite for meth exploded in the 1990s and 2000s, the Triads positioned themselves as suppliers. They smuggled precursor chemicals through Sydney's docks, hiding them in shipping containers filled with seafood, furniture, or electronics. Suburban warehouses were then converted into meth labs, churning out billions in product. With every shipment, profits skyrocketed, turning Chinatown and Cabramatta into hubs of drug wealth. The Vietnamese 5T gang, led by Tri Minh Tran, turned Cabramatta into the heroin capital of Australia. Young recruits ran drug houses and distribution networks, while older bosses laundered profits into restaurants, property, and casinos. Violence was common. Public shootings, turf disputes, and brutal punishments kept communities living in fear. But behind the violence was staggering wealth. Unlike Sydney's flashy nightclub kings, the Triads preferred to blend in. Leaders attended community events, donated to charities, and posed as successful businessmen. In reality, they were billionaires in disguise, their fortunes quietly embedded in Sydney's real estate market and commercial centres. By the 2000s, law enforcement admitted that Asian syndicates controlled much of the country's meth trade, worth up to $15 billion annually. Local gangs and bikies became distributors, mere middlemen for foreign masterminds who rarely needed to step foot in Australia. In Sydney, the Triads demonstrated the ultimate criminal strategy: remain invisible, but own everything. Their wealth reshaped the underworld, proving that the most powerful empires are the ones you barely see. 2. The Comancheros, Sydney's biker cartel, estimated wealth over $5 billion in drugs and extortion. When the roar of Harley-Davidsons echoed through Sydney's streets, it wasn't just the sound of rebellion, it was the arrival of billion-dollar cartels. The Comancheros, born in Sydney in the 1960s, grew into one of the most feared biker gangs in the world. What started as a brotherhood of leather jackets and beer-soaked clubhouses evolved into an empire built on narcotics, extortion, and global smuggling. The Comancheros legend was forged in 1984 during the infamous Milpera massacre. On Father's Day, their feud with the breakaway bandidos erupted in a bloody gunfight in a Sydney car park. 7 people were killed, including an innocent teenager. The massacre shocked Australia, but instead of destroying the bikies, it immortalized them. From that day on, the Comancheros became a name synonymous with violence and fear. Under leaders like Mick Howie in the 2000s, the gang transformed into a sophisticated syndicate. Howie's reign was marked by violence, including the infamous 2009 Sydney airport brawl, where a man was beaten to death in front of horrified passengers. His successor, Mark Buddle, pushed the Comancheros into international crime. Operating from Dubai and later Cyprus, Buddle allegedly oversaw multi-million-dollar drug shipments, proving the Comancheros had outgrown Australian borders. Their wealth was staggering. Billions flowed from cocaine and meth smuggled through Sydney's docks. Profits funded mansions, fleets of custom Harley-Davidsons, exotic cars, and fortified clubhouses. Even in prison, leaders directed operations through encrypted networks and burner phones, showing that bars and walls couldn't contain their influence. By the 2000s, the Comancheros had become more corporation than gang, with ranks structured like a boardroom. Associates acted as soldiers, enforcers, and distributors, ensuring the empire thrived. In Sydney, the Comanchero patch wasn't just a symbol of loyalty. It was a warning. Their empire proved that bikies were no longer outlaws on the fringe. They were billion-dollar businessmen on two wheels, ruling the city's underworld with steel and blood. 1. The Lebanese Mafia, Sydney's untouchable empire, estimated wealth, billions in narcotics and smuggling. At the very top of Sydney's underworld sits the Lebanese Mafia, a loose network of powerful families whose reach extends across decades. Emerging in the 1970s, these clans built their fortunes on heroin, smuggling, and later cocaine and meth distribution. While the Ibrahims and Hamzis dominated headlines, the Lebanese Mafia quietly cemented itself as Sydney's most enduring empire. Families like the Darwiches and Razaks grew rich from narcotics pipelines stretching from Lebanon, Southeast Asia, and South America. Their control of Sydney's ports gave them direct access to shipments worth billions. Drugs hidden in cargo containers flowed into the city, and with them came a river of cash that funded real estate portfolios, car dealerships, and international businesses. The Lebanese Mafia's power wasn't built solely on violence, though they were notorious for it, but on structure. Family loyalty ensured generational control. Fathers passed down territories to sons, cousins, and nephews, creating dynasties that survived arrests, assassinations, and police raids. While street soldiers carried out shootings and extortion, bosses lived in luxury homes, maintaining the image of successful businessmen. In neighborhoods across Western Sydney, their influence was absolute. Extortion rackets ensured businesses paid for protection, while drug dealers operated openly, knowing whose name backed them. Even rival gangs, bikies, Asian crews, and street syndicates often had to negotiate with the Lebanese clans to move product. Their reputation alone commanded obedience. Publicly, some family members appeared as respected community figures. Privately, they were billionaires of the underworld. Their fortunes rivaled Sydney's wealthiest elites, but unlike the polished businessmen of the harbour, their money flowed from blood. The Lebanese Mafia remains Sydney's untouchable empire. Their control of ports, global connections, and intergenerational power has made them the true billion-dollar kings of the city's shadows. Sydney may dazzle the world with its harbour views, luxury towers, and endless sunshine. But behind the skyline lies another city, one built by cartels, clans, and dynasties of blood money. From the glittering clubs of King's Cross to the war zones of western suburbs, organized crime turned Sydney into a billion-dollar empire. Here, money isn't just wealth. It buys silence. It corrupts institutions. It builds kingdoms in the shadows, untouched by law. And as long as Sydney remains a global crossroads of trade, its shadows will always belong to crime's billion-dollar kings